Okay, welcome to the second Armageddon Videocast. We still don't have a catchy name for it, so if you've got one, please feel free to suggest it. The comments on this YouTube clip are probably a good place to do that if you want to do that. So I said that this time I would talk about how I came on staff, or how I came to mudding, and it's sort of a convoluted chain. I had always been a gamer in high school and in college, and when I went off to grad school, I was no longer around my gaming group, and I missed them sorely. I was reading about a wonderful thing called the Internet, which was sort of new at the time, and I found out about a thing called MUDs. So I went and I logged into one called Dark Castle, and it was a hack and slash. And I started playing. I started a monk named Small Parakeet, and I'm not quite sure where that name came from. And I leveled her to 60, and somewhere along the way I ended up coming onto staff. What had happened was I reported more typos than anyone else in the history of the game, and so they made me staff. So I built a few areas, and I generally get along with people, and I tend to work fairly well, and I'm a good communicator. So I ended up sort of working my way up the chain of command, and I ended up becoming one of the top level folks, and with the title of World Implementer. And at some point along the line, one of the other implementers used to log on, and he would go idle for hours at a time. And it was somewhat frustrating. You would say things to him, and he would come back 2 hours later and respond to the question, by which time you would have forgotten whatever it was you had asked, or would no longer need any help or whatever. So he is sitting there, we're all kind of hanging out, and suddenly on the M channel he says, "Oh, of course, Sukrath, Diva, and Hecro," and we're all like, okay. And it turned out he'd been playing Armageddon, which had just recently opened, and there were no karma restrictions at the time. So what you would do is, if you made an elementalist, you would keep kind of careful notes about the spell words, because that way the next time you ran one of those elementalists, you didn't have to sit there and figure out the words for fireball all over again. So I started playing. I made a halfling character as my very first character. Her name was Bramble. It was around the time that halflings still would run into Tuluk. They didn't really interact with humans, but they would kind of scurry through the streets every once in a while, and I went into Flint's and got chased out. And the character ended up dying to a copper-skinned dwarf NPC, for those that remember those Black Moon Raider NPCs. And after that, I made this assassin in Alanak, and I got hired very early on in her career, 2 hours or so into her career, along with my friend Sean, who'd also made a character who was a burglar. We got hired by Khan, and he wanted us to assassinate this rival merchant. And Khan was a pretty famous character and lasted for many years in the game, so I would interact with him in several incarnations. And he's like, "Okay, I'm going to lure him into this warehouse and lock the door, and you jump out and backstab him." And that was a point on Armageddon where the minute somebody locked a door, you were like, "Oh, holy cow, someone's about to kill me." Actually, it still kind of holds true to some extent. So we wait for this merchant. I jump out, I backstab, and of course I'm a 2-hour assassin. I can't fight my way out of a paper bag, and so I'm, ineffectually grazing this guy. And he runs away. He shouts for the guards. Soldiers come pouring in, and I get picked up by this half-giant soldier who starts dragging me off, as is their way, to jail. And I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of bored, and the jail walk is slow, and I'm bored, as I said. And so as we go past the Traders Inn, I shout, "Help, help, I'm being repressed," which is a line from Monty Python, for those of you not familiar with that classic film. And the half-giant gets irritated with me, and he starts shaking me and cuffing me upside the head, and every time he does it, I get damaged, and I think, "Oh, holy cow, they're going to kill me before I even get to jail," and I get thrown in jail and admonished to think the better of my ways. And okay, and so I sit there in jail for a while, and finally I'm like, well, I need to go eat dinner or whatever. And I log back in, and I find out that I've been permanently crimmed, and I'm sitting there in the jail. And eventually I find out that the person who's put me there is Hallister, and I've got to kind of wait for his schedule and mine to coincide. And so I'll log on every once in a while for a few minutes and, you know, emote the rats, emote the cries coming through the darkness, emote the, you know, sobs brokenly in the corner. And what happened was that Hallister was so irritated with what he perceived as my frivolity that he had done this. And I just want to say that this is the man who approved a character with a short description, the Ranger with the funny shoes, and went so far as to make that character a special item, a pair of funny shoes, because he thought that S-Desk was so funny. So this is the man dragging me off for frivolity. I just want that to be made clear. It's in the video record now. So anyway, so then I started running Alcyone, and I'll talk about her another time. I was increasingly sort of disillusioned with Dark Castle. There was some kind of internal staff bickering, and the guy who ran the game was sort of running a scam. He wasn't allowed to make money off the Daitu code, so he was taking donations for this supposed second version of the game that was coming along, and he would sell people special items on the game, basically. And this was kind of disillusioning, particularly when you're in graduate school and you're kind of scrimping and saving, and here's this guy popping on periodically to talk about, you know, the hundreds of dollars he's making, and you're just like, oh, why am I putting all this time into this? So, and the other thing that had happened with Dark Castle was that it had gotten very mean and very grief-oriented, and there were clans who kind of, because people had put a lot of money into these special items, they could outkill anyone else on the MUD, and they would kind of just devote their time to making things as miserable as possible for you. And it got kind of crappy and mean, and I thought very petty. So I just kept on playing Dark Castle more, kept on playing Armageddon more and more, and started hanging out with those people, and I brought some of the people from Dark Castle that I enjoyed playing with over to Armageddon, and finally I sort of officially let the other staff know that I had quit, and I used to talk to Nesselin on ISCA, which was a BBS run by the University of Iowa that a lot of players and staff talked on, and we had gotten to be, I don't know, not chums, but we had people who enjoyed talking about books or whatever, and I talked to him periodically. And at that point, I felt comfortable saying, well, I quit Dark Castle. When are you going to bring me on staff? And he said, oh, well, I've just been waiting for you to ask that, and that was, in fact, how I came on staff. So I invited myself onto staff, and, of course, you all got stuck with me as a result, because Nesselin didn't say no when he had the chance. So that's how I came on staff. In another episode, I will talk about what it was like to be on staff at first and talk about some of the shenanigans of the bad old days. Other things I want to talk about include the Great Israeli Hack. I'll talk more about how some of the game policies developed. And I'm going to indulge myself and talk about one of my favorite characters of all time, the first kind of long-lived character that I ran, who was Alcyone, who I figure is worthy of a cast of her own. So, until next time, happy gaming. Keep playing.